Okay, hi guys, welcome back to another tutorial, and today I'll be working on Blender and showing you the best render settings for a low render time and a high quality output. So the first thing we want to adjust is GPU compute, which we use both CPU and GPU. Next thing, sampling. This is the number of samples for each pixel, meaning the smaller the render sample, the lower quality and the lower detail there will be, but the lower render times. So I tend to have this on 128, which I think is a sweet spot for render times and quality. Next setting is adaptive sampling, which reduces the samples in areas that have much noise and speeds up render times basically. Next thing is denoising, which we want to have an optics which uses AI denoising, which built into NVIDIA, so you need an NVIDIA graphics card, but for AMD it would have to be something else which I'm not currently sure. Next thing, light pass. You want to set this to 5 and everything else to 4. So the total is basically the total bounces, diffuse maximum, diffuse bounces, glossy maximum, glossy, etc. Turn up the volume if you're using volumetrics, but if you're not using volumetrics, then keep this at 0. Turning this up would obviously same as everything, the maximum volume bounces. Clamping, no, for caustics, reflective, refractive. Exposure, that's how bright the scene is. If we were to go into render preview now, it's the exposure, so if we were to increase this, increase the exposure. I tend to keep this at 1 and just do color correction when I get into After Effects. This is the contrast. You can turn the contrast up through using this. You can have very high, but I tend to do this in After Effects. Next thing, we go into our dimensions. I tend to have this on 1080p, but you can lower it to 720 and upscale it in After Effects, or you can increase it to 1440, etc. Frame rate, I tend to have this at 30. Output, this is just where you want to save your scene. Keep this on PNG. Color depth 16, RGBA color, and compression 0. Even a smaller file size, you can turn this up to 15, but I tend to just keep it 0. Denoising data on, and denoising on. So that's everything for cycles. Okay, so on to Eevee settings. First we'll turn ambient occlusion on, which will add shadows to your scene. Turn bloom on, which will diffuse the brighter parts. For example, let's say you had a point light here, it would diffuse that. Scene surface reflections, which will add reflections. I tend to put this choose position to 0.8, but putting it to 1 will increase render times. I don't put motion blur on as I do that in After Effects. Film transparent, you can put transparent on as you can see on the edges, but I don't tend to do that. I like to have the sky. Color management, again, you can add contrast, and sampling, I tend to have this on 64 since I feel like Eevee doesn't need as high samples, and you can reduce render times by doing so. Everything else, just keep it in the same as in circles, and yeah. Some extra little things you can do is you can go into here and render region, which means when you're in viewport, it will only render your camera view and not the edges, meaning it will render quicker and you can see your image quicker. So let's say like this, went into camera, and it will render this quicker. One more thing is you can enable auto tile size add-on, which is download and go into preferences and install it, which will automatically calculate the best tile size for you and optimize render times. Once you're done, just click render animation, and you're good to go. Sorry about being such a short video, but I appreciate the support, and thanks for watching. Peace.